Okay, welcome back everybody. Thank you very much for joining. This is the Contract Fabrics for the Care Sector webinar with Edmund Bell, and we're very pleased to have you. I am Fiona Napier, I'm our International Sales Director.
I'm Stephen Dobson and I'm the head of the contract in the UK.
So, as always with these webinars, we'd like to give you a little schedule up front so you know what's coming up. Obviously, we're going to start with something that some of you will be familiar with, readily familiar with by now, where we give you a little bit of background about Edmund Bell, just to give you some context. We'll tell you what Edmund Bell does and is nowadays.
Yeah, and we'll give you an overview of our fabrics, so whether that's drapery or upholstery, in terms of the care environment, in terms of what to look for. There's so many technical things that you see in fabrics, we're just going to highlight the important ones today.
That's it. I think one of the things that, or the way we've been touting this webinar to people has been, it's not purely about our product, it's also about understanding the technical requirements for care settings, especially if you have historically maybe done more hospitality projects or projects that don't have such high technical demands.
Yep.
Then we're going to take you briefly through some of the online resources that we now have to offer you as a contractor, as a specifier, whatever, to help you in your job.
Yep, and then at the end, hopefully some of you might fire us some questions so that we're not sitting here doing nothing. So please think of some questions for the last 10 minutes and we'll gladly answer them for you.
So you can enter your questions into the chat box and we will get back to you at the end of the session and or afterwards if need be. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you can't currently see us and the presentation together, then you might want to go into the top right hand corner of your screen and click gallery view.
Yep, and please just go back to the questions. Our head of marketing, Adam's been sat here doing nothing for the last hour, so we could do him kind of asking some questions. So please bombard him with
idle. We do all the work. Okay, so to get started, let's explain a little bit about Edmund Bell and why you might want to consider us as a supplier for your care sector project. So Edmund Bell's been around a damn long time by now.
Yeah, so since 1855 is what we've been saying for the last, feels like the last 12 months, but it's 1855, so I think it's important to point that out because, you know, we're a very long established business that's been around for some time.
We've always been in fabrics, not always in the contract ranges for interiors that you see, that we're going to be talking about today. We started in apparel linings for jackets, and then moved around about the Second World War really into true blackouts for the Blitz. And in the last, I guess, 30 years or so have really turned our attentions to contract fabrics. That's not to say that we don't still do a very big range of domestic linings as well.
Yeah, no, so the business was bought in 2008 and by the Atherton family as part of a wider group of businesses, and the infrastructure around those businesses allowed us to kind of develop into this contract expert business in terms of fabric. So we've gone from a commodity-based, high volume, low price product into this massive range of decorative fabrics that we now have around us.
You're going to hear us talk a lot today about UK origin goods as well. One of the major benefits of the group aspect of what Stephen was just mentioning is we have our own UK finishing plant. So we do have UK origin on a lot of our goods. It means we control stocks, quality and many other aspects of production a lot more closely than other suppliers do.
Yeah.
So today we obviously have the situation where we have UK production,
yep.
We have UK stocks here, we supply internationally to over 55 countries and it's more every year.
Yep.
Yeah, I think one other thing that we're going to need to touch on here, especially for healthcare, for care sector projects, is all of the testing that we talk about during this presentation. When we do it for you, it's always at a third-party accredited laboratory. So we do indicative testing in-house, and then we always have things third-party accredited tested for you.
And another thing we're going to touch on is basically around the wider groups. We've mentioned we're part of a larger group, and we're part of a group that's £45 million worth of turnover that is specialised in the soft furnishing industry, the textile manufacturing industry. We're going to look at some other products that kind of stem from that group that may be useful to you.
Normally we don't present about, right? So it's something completely new.
In fact, it's new to me.
5 minutes ago, more or less. Yeah, okay. So you should be seeing right now a little slide that is meant to give you some further confidence in Edmund Bell, due to the fact that we are giving you, I guess, a brief overview of some key references. So you can see there are some hospitality brand references that you may recognize. There's residential, of course, relevant to this particular talk. We have elderly care brands. We have education brands and student accommodation.
Large groups of rehab centres, all sorts of different things that we've been working on for years. And I think, you know, coming from that commodity industry where we would perhaps be seen as a kind of wholesale distributor, working with brands like this should give you the confidence that, you know, we should be a supplier of choice.
You should know what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
So in terms of care projects, I think we want to be, when we were kind of marketing this session, we did point out that by care, what we mean is quite broad. We've been used a lot in the past, say, for elderly care style, assisted living projects, but actually under the bracket of care, we also include things like childcare, schools potentially, healthcare, which might be from hospitals to clinics.
Absolutely, and I think our product range has developed around how the healthcare industry has adapted over the years now, whether that's the increase in things like mental health awareness of these illnesses around dementia, whether it's looking at designs in terms of the fabric themselves, the colours, all these sorts of things. And we work more closer with the designers in this field, or the experts in this field, and, you know, can kind of recommend where our products should sit and how we should work with them.
Actually, yeah, that's a really good point. We've so far only talked about the technical aspects of the care sector, but there are aesthetic aspects as well, aren't there?
Yeah.
One thing we're going to touch on is how certainly elderly care, a lot of the assisted living kind of settings, they're coming more towards high-end residential or even high-end hospitality.
I think that's right, and I think you might have seen webinars and things by other companies and other businesses over the last 12 months, and I think the focus on healthcare it's been around, you know, making it homely. This was somebody, you know, a lady or gentleman,
not institutional,
not institutional and stereotypical, and bring in these decorative fabrics. You're right, some of these may have been intended for the hospitality market initially, but why can't you put them in a healthcare setting?
Why shouldn't it look nice and be technical?
If the technical properties of those fabrics meet the requirements of that setting, then why not?
And but then obviously, as you can see noted there as well, and you did mention dementia already, there are additional aspects to the aesthetics of a care setting that you wouldn't see in something like hospitality. We do need to be aware of things like that. So we'll touch on that as we go further through the presentation. So to come back to that technical aspect, because we did say that we would best try to educate you, if you don't already know, on some of the additional things that you want to bear in mind when you are specifying or selecting for a care sector project.
Yeah, and most of you will know that these sorts of things are things that you will ask for, but maybe more pertinently is, you know, you look at Edmund Bell's product range. How do you know which of those products have those technical performance features, I guess? So, you know, whether it's housekeeping, whether you're looking at washability, so can you wash that fabric to a temperature that allows for thermal disinfection?
Super big topic at the moment, isn't it? If it's not antimicrobial, and we will come back to antimicrobial shortly, but if it isn't an antimicrobial article, then you do need to be able to clean it, especially then.
Yeah, and
in fact, ideally both.
Yeah, ideally both. And I think Drapery's taken a little bit of time to catch up to Upholstery. I think Upholstery and antimicrobial or antibacterial finish is marketed around quite commonly. Yeah. With Drapery, it's kind of one of those products that's kind of in the pipeline, and I think, yeah, okay, there's the odd base cloth that can be printed on out there, but generally there doesn't seem to be a lot of it in the marketplace. So if you haven't got an antimicrobial finish.
So one thing we've really focused on is this thermal disinfection. And what's really nice about our particular range is this is something to look out for generally, not just in Edmund Bell's range, is inherently flame retardant goods. That means they are flame retardant not by virtue of a treatment that's been sprayed on them that therefore can wick off when being cleaned, but instead it's the yarn itself that melts away from a flame in the instance of a fire. So you can fulfill your flame retardant requirements for whatever market you're in, and the goods are also washable at a high temperature without any change in. So we're checking for change in flame retardancy, but we also check for color fastness, making sure that when you wash it at 60 or 70 degrees Celsius, that the color doesn't drain out of it, and also shrinkage. Yeah,
and the minimum you're looking for is, you know, if you're looking at standards and being technical, is that BS 5867 Part 2B and C. So you need in your fabric to meet Part 2C as a bare
Your
minimum.
Part 2C is really stringent testing as well. It's
absolutely.
multiple washes. How many washes is it? It's ridiculous.
50?
50 washes at high temperature. So, I can't imagine the circumstances in which you're going to do that to your curtains, but they can take it.
They can and they have to take it, the
Yeah.
environment they're in. But I think what we're wanting to point out today, and what we will point out today, is that sounds like a fabric that's going to be really, really
Grim.
A fabric that we washed at high temperatures, that has high light fastness test, that's going to do all of these things. It can't look good. Actually, they can.
Yes, they can. Next thing on this list here is bleach cleanable. Now that isn't going to be relevant to absolutely all settings and things, and indeed not much of our range is bleach cleanable in truth. It is something to look out for though. When an article says bleach cleanable, typically they actually mean bleach solution cleanable, right? You're not pouring bleach direct onto your fabric.
Messed up straight on.
You normally you'd be creating a 1 to 10, 1 in 10th, I think, solution of bleach for those kind of settings that really need it. And typically it's your vinyls and things like that. They can take that kind of treatment. So we do have an article we'll tell you all about in a bit.
Yeah, and other things like stain resistance, things like being waterproof on your upholstery, all important factors.
Waterproof is also a code, isn't it?
It is a code, yeah.
I'm avoiding saying what I really want to say, but PP proof.
Yeah, so it is that, and it is the setting that it's in, unfortunately. We need to make sure that things are tested for urea and stain testing, all this kind of stuff. It is important, and this is what we're saying today is there's a bit of taboo around it, but why should there be? It is what it is. It needs to meet these technical performances. And
in fact, if it's tested to that, then it's going to hold up great against a bit of Coca-Cola and a food and beverage setting as well.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Then finally on this particular list, we talk about martindale, Weizenbeek and pilling. So these are 3 different kinds, if you like, of abrasion testing. These are things that you absolutely want to see tested for in any other contract setting, on upholstery especially. But in a care setting, let's say that we are in a care home or we are in a school, in a public area or something like that, these chairs are getting some usage day in, day out, much more so than an armchair in a hotel room.
Yeah. And I think that's a big thing to draw out of what we're talking about with these performance features. Yes, we're telling you they're technical. They'll meet these performance levels. We're telling you that they are aesthetic. They will look good. But ultimately, we're commercial businesses. So you want these fabrics to be durable. You want these finished sofas, finished curtains, finished chairs, whatever the finished product may be, to stand the test.
It's a business they're going into.
Exactly. So your end user, at the end of the chain, doesn't want to be replacing their curtains every so often because they don't manage it more than a few washes, or the fabrics on their sofas are not stain resistant.
Yeah.
So all of these things come into play and ultimately give you longevity and durability.
So just to clarify those particular terms that we use, martindale is the, rub abrasion test that is used most frequently in Europe and the UK, and Weizenbeek or double rub is what is used most often in the States. Some other places use that as well. Pilling is then slightly different, tends to be more important on things like maybe top of bed and other accessories, I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe cushions, things like that.
Yeah.
So we've gone through all of these kind of durability tests here that we've talked about, if you like.
Yeah, all the boring stuff. But I think, on top of that, there's the environment now. So like more and more, top designers get involved with care home groups and care homes, and the acoustic sound absorbency of a fabric, the dementia-friendly designs, looking at light refraction values on upholstery fabrics. Natural looks and handles, making things feel more homely. Some
of the bizarre and garish things that you can get away with in, say, a boutique hotel are not going to be the same. You're not going to be looking at the same kind of things in a care setting. It's just not going to go down.
It's not. So we look at all those things.
The other thing we mentioned there is natural look and handle. And this is something very close to our heart in product development, because you've heard us talk about inherently flame retardant. Well, there are a few natural fibres that are inherently flame retardant, right? But we're trying to tick all these technical boxes, all these requirements for good price, FR, washable, all this stuff, and yet give you something that looks natural, that's a comforting presence.
Not an easy task, is
no, indeed. And I think some of the articles that we're going to show you really achieve that.
Yeah.
So a couple of other things that we definitely need to touch on that are very, very important. We already talked about fire ratings. probably they should be at the top of the list in truth, because they are in fact a legal requirement in most places.
So,
they're not extra at all.
They're not extra at all. No,
No.
I think it's key to point out that, everything we supply in terms of contract market, they are FR to the relevant standard.
Yeah.
There is no need to worry about those, and all those certificates are a prerequisite of what we do. What we're giving you today is the extras on top of that.
Yeah. The other thing is, if you're perhaps, if you are in a situation where you've typically done other kinds of projects in the past, or you come from a residential background, it's your first foray into clinics and schools and what have you, maybe you're not completely confident in what certification holds. We often, most of the time, we know that stuff, we can guide you there. We normally have already fulfilled the requirements. A good example is, for instance, we certificate for the states for upholstery and for drapery settings and usages, and there's been recently a big change where the previously Californian standard has been moved to be, relevant to the whole country. So that's not yet gone into play, but we've already started planning and testing for that, and we keep up to date. Yeah,
absolutely. It's our job to do that so that you don't have to worry about it, I think. And I think we're also going to add on some things that are very important and seem to be, the momentum with these are really, really moving forward in terms of sustainability, and having products that can be recycled. And they're important. They always should have been, and they still are, and they'll continue to be. So I think we're working with people like Ecotex, where we get our products certified standard 100, all sorts of different things that we're doing behind the scene that complement the rest of the work, the rest of the features that we just
something to really bring out here is, we've talked about inherently flame retardant and polyester. And polyester shouldn't be a bad word, honestly. We have a lot of natural fibre in our linings range, but for flame retardancy, as you heard me mention there, applying chemicals is not what you want to do, right? Nobody wants to hear chemicals. Polyester is a plastic product, but in terms of sustainability, it can be a better option because of its durability, because of the amount of water and waste used to produce it. For various different reasons.
And there's more and more forms of recycled polyester coming onto the market every day. It's becoming more and more common, and inevitably businesses like us will have more and more recycled content in our fabrics.
Yeah.
And it's something that's being worked towards all the time.
That's it. So we're going to start talking about drapery a little bit. We're going to touch on upholstery in a bit as well, but we have a few different aspects of our drapery range that are super relevant to care sectors.
Yeah, and I think I recommend drapery products in terms of dim out. When I'm talking to somebody who recommend a fabric, generally I recommend a dim out more than anything else. And I'll do that because, as you'll see from you're looking at it on your screen, it's an inherently flame retardant product. The bits about the natural look we'll touch on it, but in terms of healthcare, it's the one fabric you can be really, really confident it's going to be washed at high temperatures.
Amy, can you maybe show people expression, because they're not going to be able to see what I'm holding up here. Expression is a really good example of how a dim out works for a care setting, because it's a 3-layer dim out. So some companies will call dim out even just a thick fabric. Ours are always a 3-layer with a black layer in between, meaning that even in the lightest colorways, they block a lot more light than a normal fabric. It's inherent polyester, meaning we haven't applied any additional chemicals that can either leach or unhealthy, or will be removed with washing.
Yeah, and you can be sound in knowledge that that's the case, because all of our dim outs are Ecotex standard 100 certified.
Yeah, definitely. And it's got despite the fact it is inherently flame retardant polyester, the look, is hopefully able to see there, is quite natural, because not only is it textured, so it actually has a herringbone texture woven into it, but it's also made with cationic yarn, meaning that the dye is drawn up differently in different parts of the yarn, so it's almost double textured. Gives it a much more natural woolly look than you'd otherwise achieve.
Yeah. And there's such a large colour palette in these, and again, stereotypically, companies usually think that we've got to go into these patterns and print patterns and things for healthcare, but actually no, there's no reason why you can't have plain drapery fabrics.
The thing about this is, firstly, it does, a plain or a semi-plain doesn't go out of fashion nearly as quickly as a print does. No. And so one thing that, we're mentioning all of these technical points that might make this relevant to a care project for you. The other thing that's really key on these, especially our piece-dyed articles, is we keep big stocks, even of the crazy colors, right? Which means that if let's say you're working on a care home, The truth of the care home projects is typically it's dribs and drabs now and then, just because of the way that those projects work. So you need to have very quick access to potentially a relatively small amount of fabric, but on a regular basis, and that's exactly what we're set up to do.
Dim outs are perfect for that, especially these sorts of dim outs, because not only do they meet those kind of technical requirements, you know, these are available next day. You know, just behind that wall behind this is just over £4 million worth of stock at any one time, so regularly available in double width, single width.
Yeah, and the double width point is really important as well, isn't it? Because, I mean, let's say we're talking about schools now, you know, tall ceilings, ever taller ceilings and bigger windows, and no need for seams. One thing we haven't touched on yet, especially relevant on expression, is the acoustic absorbency element. Obviously, you know, big spaces like in schools, or indeed, you know, a homely space that you're trying to create in, say, a care home, is helped by, you know, not having too much echo in the room. Now, expression, I think dim outs perform well because they are multi-layer fabrics anyway, but expression actually gets a grade A, which is the best grade on acoustic absorbency testing. Like all the rest of our certifications, you can find the reports if you want. You've got, you know, tons and tons of detail in there. I wouldn't say that I understand every aspect of acoustic absorbency testing, but nor do I need to.
Down to the last decibel. I think the important thing to take from that is, you know, a fabric like this, when you guys now, you know, healthcare is moving into this kind of hospitality way of thinking, where the experience of the person that's using that room is important, and having a sound absorbing fabric like expression plays a massive part in that.
Do you know, I mean, we're finding, I mean, Edmund Bell, with a background in blackouts, has historically had an awful lot to do with hospitality, but we're actually finding, especially in the last year or so, I guess no surprise, that healthcare and care sector projects have made up a vast amount of our pipeline.
There's a lot of business out there. It's a constantly changing market, and we're an aging country, aren't we?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that's where all the money now is in an older demographic, so it makes sense that we start pandering to those tastes and to those needs. We have also mentioned here, and I think it's worth us actually showing you some samples. It's not just the dim outs, okay? We have loads and loads of dim outs. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
We've got loads of dim outs. They all pretty much fulfill these same kind of tech points that you're looking at, and you know, different textures and different colorways and what have you. But we also have single drapes, from linings to just, I guess, practical single drapes like Manhattan. Things like, I don't have it hanging here sadly, but things like the matrix striae. Actually, I don't know what, maybe Amy, you could pull up matrix equilibrium.
We've got a whole binder full of them.
Yeah.
And I think when we're talking about things like washability, 71 degrees, or meeting that part 2C, we're talking about Ecotech Standard 100. You know, when you're doing, you know, drapery is important, curtains are important, absolutely. But you're doing cushions, you're putting bed runners in place. Why wouldn't you put a fabric that also meets those standards?
Well, I guess for things like bed runners, more than anything else, in fact. So yeah, we actually haven't touched on this range here, but our range comes in a selection of 5 binders. We haven't put the 5th one up here because we didn't think it was strictly relevant to this particular talk.
No.
But you'll see we have light control, which is where you will find the dim outs and shears, as well as blackouts. We have print, which we're going to come back to in just a minute, very important for care settings. Weave includes single drapes, also smooth, which is a coloured lining, and also the jacquards. So the jacquards indeed probably are really relevant here for the higher end of
100% they are. I would say, I think if we go back to the last few projects we've done for care home groups, the majority of it has been out of our Soho Club range.
Really?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so lots of,
I'm calling on Amy an awful lot here, but it is best to see it up close.
Yeah, things like you've got Grosvenor in there, Divine, Eaton. These are things that, you know, they're perfect because they are FR to put the standard to the BS 5867 Part 2C. They can be washed at high temperatures. They're inherently flame retardant.
Stocked.
Very, very competitive in terms of price compared to other woven fabrics in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And we stock them here.
And these particular, I mean, these 2 ranges, Sanctuary and Soho Club, they're actually put together as a collection. So you've got coordinates within the same colour range, which is really handy for that kind of setting.
Absolutely.
If you don't want to put too much thought into it, you need a quick solution, you need a quick turnaround. Okay, teal it is, and you've got loads of coordinates and plans.
Yeah, and believe it or not, we've had this range out for a couple of years now, and it was probably a couple of years in development before that. You know, we don't just bring a product out on a whim or within 3 months of work going behind the scenes. Sometimes takes years.
Yeah.
We brought this out with hospitality market, I suppose at the time in mind, and I'm talking 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And actually it's the healthcare sector.
Yeah, well, you sometimes surprise us too.
Yeah, they do surprise.
Yeah, so we have really loads of really nice designs in here. Edmund Bell's historically really been known for the planes and semi-planes, but this is really worth your time to have a look. There's some really nice stuff in here. The kind of things that you'll find through fabric editors the world over at considerably higher prices.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing to mention, and we actually touched on shears very much, didn't we? But you'll find those in the single drape. Sorry, in the
and again, just as important, it's very wrong of us to pigeonhole healthcare and think it's going to be stereotypical print and antimicrobial upholstery only. Actually, all these decorative products come into play. Why not? Absolutely, it does.
Well, I mean, privacy. Well, what better luxury is there than privacy? If we're trying to get away from an institutional style of care home, for example, then privacy needs to be up there.
Yeah, absolutely. How are we doing, Amy? Next.
So we're going to come back to prints as a general topic because that kind of spans upholstery and drapery, but we are going to just skip over to upholstery now because like we've said, there's an awful lot of sitting down in care homes and what have you.
So we've done a webinar this morning that was more in depth on upholstery, but I think we'll in terms of healthcare, I think some of the important factors. So I think we've got 2 brands in our upholstery range. We've got our Enduracare and our Enduracare Plus range.
So Enduracare is, if you like, the heavy contract, and Enduracare Plus is the severe contract. It does everything.
Yes, but again, sometimes we as contract fabric people, possibly sometimes.
There's no reason not to overspec. Just in the same way as we've explained in the past that there's no reason not to use our flame retardant blackouts and other articles in a residential setting. Perfectly, it's overspec. It's perfectly applicable. There's no reason why you shouldn't use antimicrobial, waterproof, stain resistant, flame retardant upholstery in a situation where it won't always be needed. Our pricing is still really aggressive.
It's just more than aggressive. It's brilliant, and I think it doesn't hurt to say this. I don't think I might get in trouble later, but still, these fabrics have come from a retail setting. These fabrics are retail fabrics. They're fabrics that you find in the large retail manufacturers. When you go and buy your sofas, when you're given options of fabrics, these fabrics will be in that mix for retail. All we've done is taken retail fabrics and brought them into the contract market. So it should be perfect for the healthcare market.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's talk specifically then about Enduracare Plus, because it is waterproof, which also means UA tested. It is stain resist. It is antimicrobial. They all have really high abrasion results. Most of them are around 100,000 Martindale or even Weizenbeek.
Yeah.
And you'll find actually you can see a diagram of one of the pattern cards here. It actually shows you the multi-layer construction of an Enduracare Plus article. So it shows that when we say waterproof, we mean it's got a PU barrier on the back, which protects the cushioning underneath the upholstery fabric.
Yep, when we say waterproof, we actually mean it's waterproof. We use a breathable membrane. Generally, it's between 2 and 5 meters in terms of the hydrostatic head test. It's all to do with water pressure and how much pressure it can withstand. Before
I know you explained it this morning, so maybe I'll explain.
I think you explained it better. I was trying to push that on.
We do sometimes use a diagram for this to avoid hand gestures. But hydrostatic head is a laboratory test done on fabrics where essentially you have a column of water that is placed atop a physical sample of fabric, and the water content of the column is increased and increased until it starts to penetrate the fabric. So essentially, when we put on our cards 2 meters plus, it means that our fabric has had 2 meters worth of water pressure on it before it started to leak. That's a lot of water.
That's a lot of pressure, absolutely.
It's more than most tents, isn't it?
Tents are generally around 1 meter.
Yeah.
So if you have a rainy night and you're in your tent going camping, it doesn't come through. Imagine another meter of pressure. That would probably cause that to cave in. So the fact that all our fabrics meet that 2 meters plus is really important to understand. And I think if it's 1 meter or less, you're really talking water resistant. You're not talking waterproof.
Yeah, a lot of things that are presented as waterproof or water resist are actually spray-on treatments. And we keep those two things completely separate. Stain resist is something that is applied, as you can see on the diagram of the card, on the face, and that will cause any liquids to pill on the surface, if you like, to bubble on the surface, which can then be wiped off. But this waterproofing is something different altogether.
Yeah, and just to be clear, there's not a guy with a big funnel pouring a watering can into it these days. It's usually done through a proper test, which is
hand gestures.
Well, technically, the hand gestures and the watering can, they have to happen at some point. So it's very technical.
The other thing that we really wanted to explain about Enduracare Plus, and something that generally is really important for a care setting, especially nowadays, is antimicrobial effects. Now, we have talked about how in Drapery, Edmund Bell tends to go for the thermal disinfection route. That's not to say we're not developing towards antimicrobial options there. It is a robust solution to it, but on upholstery, we already have the solution for antimicrobial treatment. So, sorry, on you go.
No, I was just going to say, it's a non-leaching, non-metallic, so it's the thing that we use with antimicrobial. And what's really important is, I see so many marketing ploys across various social media sites where it almost comes across like it kills these things. It doesn't, it just inhibits the growth.
Yeah.
You know, it's really important when we talk about antimicrobial that you don't neglect the cleaning of the product. So even though we're bringing you an Enduracare Plus product, which is waterproof, which is stain resistant,
yeah,
it's antimicrobial, there will still be care instructions.
Don't be filthy.
Please clean it as instructed.
Yeah, so before we start explaining any more about what the treatment or how the treatment works, one of the key things to remember is a fabric is better in many respects than a hard surface when it comes to inhibiting microbial growth anyway. So better to have a soft surface than a hard one, better to have a banquette than a table at the end of the bed or whatever. Yeah. But if you then team that with an antimicrobial treatment of some kind, especially one as useful as ours, if you like, you're onto a winner. So this particular treatment that we use in Enduracare Plus is, as Stephen said, it's durable to the cleaning instructions that we give for each article. It is non-metallic. There have been many previous, or much older, I think, treatments that involve silvers and things like that. It doesn't result in adaptive microorganisms. That's another important one when we're talking about new strains of viruses all the time, isn't it? Yeah. It works by puncturing microbes. And it works by puncturing all sorts of different microbes, and it's been laboratory tested for a vast array of different bacteria.
Like
Here's a big list.
It's like a series of spikes, little spikes that you just don't see, don't feel, that does the puncturing, and that's where it comes in, and that's where it's really cool for the healthcare market.
So I think there's a list of bacteria, there's yeast, there's algae, and of course there's key viruses it's been tested for, most notable for healthcare settings, norovirus and coronavirus, though we will add the provision that it has been tested for feline coronavirus, because at the time of testing, you couldn't get COVID-19 for commercial testing. However, it's supposed to be very comparable. So I think we will come on to prints now. Yeah.
Indeed. So I suppose, so prints is, I was just talking, we had some customers in here today, and we were talking about prints and the pros and cons, I suppose, of print. And for the healthcare market in particular, there's a lot more pros than cons. You know, you've got a various range of base cloths, and I think historically this is where the healthcare sector has kind of focused most of its time in terms of transfer prints. You know, your upholstery base cloths range from standard drapery products, words that you guys will be familiar with, things like Panama. You know, these sorts of base cloths have been around for donkey's years.
Single drapes, essentially, multi-usage fabrics.
Yeah, they were all fabrics that were created originally for the healthcare market with these printed designs on, because you could wash them at high temperatures. Yeah. From that, we kind of developed, we developed a multitude of base cloths in very different widths. We can even print on shears. We can print on upholstery.
Shears are some of the nicest ones. Beautiful.
Absolutely. We can print on dim out fabrics like we were talking about earlier on. And the dim out fabric is probably a really great choice for the healthcare market because of the multitude of technical performance features that suit the healthcare market. You can actually print on a dim out, and not just one. You can print on a variety of them with different textures, and you can bring different designs to life. So there's a lot of pluses and pros to do with print.
The way that we present print, obviously we do have a binder, and actually you just referred to the multitude of different base cloths that we have. We have a card that gives you all of those base cloths. I think there's 18 now.
I think the base cloths have outgrown the card.
Loads. And that card shows them unprinted and printed, so you can see how the actual base cloth affects the colours. For instance, you will find that light colourways, maybe whites and things, will take on a little bit of the colour of the base cloth. You know, if you a dim out may sometimes grin through a little grey.
Yeah,
so it's good to know about that.
And we make that clear in the pattern books and
you can see that. Yeah, we sample it properly. So they're sampled like that, and then within this binder we actually have cards dedicated to collections of prints, and that is typically what we're going to continue doing, I think, with prints, is give you collections that allow you to coordinate loads of different designs.
Yeah.
So, you know, some of this particular collection, I think you're seeing some of them on your screen at the moment, but we have one here called Bloom, which is unsurprisingly florals, but also some geometrics in there, some abstraction. The colorways all picked mainly with the healthcare kind of sector in mind, but not, you know, not to exclude other settings as well.
Yeah, I think print has moved on with time, but so has the healthcare market. I think where print maybe historically, in some cases, has come out a bit stereotypical, with digital printing and the ability now to do bespoke printing and really to just come from a concept to an actual fabric. It's so easy now. It just brings everything into play, and you can get lost in it. You really, really can. And I think where we're developing prints and print designs that can be used in all sorts of market sectors, not thinking that it's not useful for the healthcare setting, it's thinking that healthcare is moving on. It's becoming
We're all bleeding into each other.
Yeah,
for sure. So you will see there's various different settings where you can see our print designs, other than the actual physical sampling. We have them online as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But apart from floral designs, we have abstracts, we have geometrics, we have
jungles,
jungle theme. We've got a really good collection of, I guess, traditional houndstooth and herringbones and things like that for a more cozy feel.
Your more traditional stripes and checks, still an abundance of those available too. So it's almost endless.
I think as well, should we talk first about custom or first about identity, Stephen?
I don't know. I suppose we can talk about custom.
Let's talk about custom, because custom is the future.
Teasing.
Yeah, custom printing. So there are solutions called Print Lab.
Yeah.
You may have heard us talk about it in the past. And it is what we try to do is, rather than put the onus on the customer to come up with a design, we like to give you the opportunity to describe to us in whatever way you like what it is you're looking for, and we will put it into effect. We have some very capable designers. They work really quickly. They're very flexible. And if you come up with something that you want, it could be a logo, it could be a photo, it could be a design, really anything. Your references could be based on Pantones, on color swatches, paint chips, really anything. This is almost the problem with Print Lab, is that the options are so endless.
They are endless, and in healthcare setting in particular, it's really cool because, you know, where we've got automatically washed at high temperatures, where you don't need a white clean fabric. We've done cubicle curtains with, I couldn't say that, and cubicle curtains with various different designs on that have been created from scratch. You know, these sorts of things that they're there at your disposal with a fabric that can be washed at 71 degrees.
Yeah, so that's it. So you can choose any of these 18 base cloths, have any design at all done on it. We can sample to you very quickly, and again, the pricing is very strong.
Absolutely.
So we are going to talk now about the upcoming range identity. So I think this is a collection due within this year.
Yeah, September.
Yeah, and I think it kind of crosses the barrier between hospitality and healthcare quite well, doesn't it?
I think it does. I think, you know, and again, this is taken, when I talk about how long things take to develop, it takes time because we like to do some research and talk to our customers and the designers that we work with, get their input. You know, this is not just Edmund Bell putting their finger in the wind and hoping that they've got it right. You know, we take a lot of opinions from different sources, and what we've come up with is this.
Apart from obviously presenting ready-made sampling and collections for you and the ease that affords you, why would we bother with collections when you have the option of custom print?
Yeah.
Mainly it's because we want to hit key sales points, key KPIs in terms of delivery time. We've touched on this before. For care settings more than any other kind of setting,
yeah. The service level is really important. It was something, if we're honest with ourselves, we can definitely be better at. And we're looking to improve this all of the time. And I think the first part of that is keep bringing out new collections. And and where we've kind of, with the last 12-18 months with the issues around the world, we're looking at bringing that back to the fore now. So the first one's September, and very quickly, just at the end of 2021, going into the beginning of 22, you're going to have another one. It's going to hit you really fast. Yeah. And we're bringing out these new geometric designs along, bringing the florals together, adding in our antimicrobial upholstery fabrics, our Enduracare Plus, put in some of our plain fabrics in with it, and bring in those pattern books and the binders to you, because ultimately you need them to go and sell them to your clients. So,
and to have a quick response option.
Yeah, and then have that speed of delivery is really important.
So this is the bit that I mentioned at the start, that is where the norm for us. So we've never really talked about redwood before, an EB webinar.
I'm looking forward to this. This is new to me.
What's on this slide? So we've told you about our finishing mill, PWP Knowles. That's just down the road from us. Another part of the group is Redwood. Redwood is, if you like, our parent company. Redwood specialises in even more technical fabrics and other aspects of soft furnishing. And there are things that Redwood offers that I guess are most relevant to customers who deal in healthcare settings, maybe even medical settings. That's come to the fore during the coronavirus pandemic, when Redwood actually was in a really good position to help people there and did an awful lot with the NHS.
That was really cool. I think a lot of you remember the plane from Turkey with all the PPE that couldn't be used. And I think Edmund Bell stepped in with its expertise and kind of offered a solution. And we found that solution.
Boy, that makes it sound good, Steve.
It sounds really cool, actually.
To the rescue.
Did really well. I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
But it's actually given us as a business an idea of, look, we've got these guys that buy these products from us for the healthcare setting. We've got all these other products around us as part of the group. Why aren't we making those more available to those people?
Yeah. So I'd say the distinction here probably is Edmund Bell's offering is much more about the soft furnishing, aesthetic interior side of things, and what Redwood has to offer, which you can see on screen. These are just some of the things they have to offer, by the way. They're probably the even more technical or medical side of things. So they do spun bond, non-woven fabrics for gowns, for surgical gowns. That's been a really important thing over the last year or so.
Really cool.
They offer sterile pre-cut cubicle curtains as well for hospital settings. They are all about medical mattresses and pressure relief. They manufacture the coverings and the mattresses together. Yeah. They also have things like weight control, but weight handling machinery and what have you too. Yeah. All news to you, Stephen.
I'm learning.
Yeah. So, and as you can see here as well, might be for a medical setting, but actually these kind of things like these mattresses are used in university settings as well, for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and I think as times are changing, every part of the contract industry, especially in the UK, there's no reason why that's not the case for the rest of the world. You've got to become more aware in terms of the hygiene side of your settings. If you're having, we talk about university halls and residences. I was in one of those once upon a time,
way back,
not the greatest of places, a long time ago, but there's a solution for it.
So this is just a couple of the samples of coated material that they use for things like cushions, wheelchair cushions, mattresses as well, that Redwood has to offer. You can see they also have finishing capabilities. They do welding, quilting, sewing, they do printing, cutting, all sorts of different things that may be relevant to you. So if they are, and if you haven't previously heard, get in touch and we'll put you in touch.
It's a really impressive facility, and I think when we talk about British manufacturing coming back to the fore, I think the Redwood side of our business really epitomises that. And I think if that's something that interests you and these products are right for you, then get in touch and we'll put you in touch with someone at Redwood.
So we do want to talk just a little bit about sustainability. We've been talking a lot about technicality, about flame retardancy, about all these different, but sustainability is something that's really important to add to the mix there, because we are talking about technical fabrics, and this is something that spans the business at the moment in terms of product development and marketing, the way that we think even about sales. It's all kind of changed over the last year because sustainability has come to the fore so much.
It has, and I think it's the biggest buzzword in the design fraternity and the hospitality side of things, absolutely, and it's moving into the healthcare side of things as well. And it's probably been there inadvertently and behind the scenes all along.
It's becoming less of a like to have and more of a need to have now.
It's becoming a necessity, I think, and I think businesses like us are constantly looking to the future and how we kind of broadly develop that side of the business. Sustainability is such a big word. You can write War and Peace underneath it.
Yes, and we do have groups of people internally who are kind of working on those policies and how things should look in the future. But we've been lucky in that, although we're certainly working towards an awful lot of sustainable practices, some are native to us already. We've been lucky in that because, things like the inherently flame retardant articles, the fact that they're inherently flame retardant means we do not add further chemicals. Tick. That gives us access to things like Oeko-Tex 100 standard, which is another big tick, right?
And all those products can be recycled.
Absolutely, yeah. We've already started recycling. I think 90% of the meters we produce can be recycled via this route we've looked at.
It's a crazy stat. And we've got fabric offcuts and wastage we have here inevitably with what we do in terms of cutting fabric every day. We take that literally within a mile away from our head office, and it's converted into carpet underlay. Yeah. So, that's always an option. And when we're working with things like Oeko-Tex standard 100 and the fact that it's not, it's been tested for those 100 chemicals that are harmful to human beings, the fact that it's free of those toxic and allergic substances means it can be recycled. So any of those that are Oeko-Tex standard 100 will be recycled as well.
Yeah, and in fact we are already doing so. The other really big one that we want to touch on is anything that's coated, anything that we coat, so back coated upholsteries like the Enduracare and Enduracare Plus articles that we've mentioned to you, the blackouts as well, they're not quite as relevant in the care setting. Yeah. These are all articles where the vast majority of the weight of that article has been added here, right? So especially for UK, for US East Coast, for Africa and Europe and honestly Middle East, most of the world. Yes, there's a definite carbon footprint advantage to be had from that, where most of these kinds of articles they're coming from, let's say, China most of the time, and there's a huge weight of goods being transported. So therefore, it's not happening.
It's 2/3 of the weight has disappeared, and we add the weight on here. So when we deliver it into the UK, then it's a finished product, and you brought that product in. 2/3 of your carbon footprint just obliterated overnight.
So I think these things will become more relevant in the future and good to bear in mind.
They should be, and there's things we should quantify more, I think.
Some difficult calculations though, not one for me. We mentioned at the start that we would give you a little heads up on some of the online resources that we now have available to you. You've probably already been on edmundbell.com. That is our normal website, very good place to go and search through different categories to find the kinds of things that might be relevant to you. However, we also have a secondary website now, fabric-hub.com. And you can create your own login to this. You can use your own email address, make your own password, and we will give you access to that. And on Fabric Hub, you can find basically any of the technical information that we've been talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's there for you as a tool. All the things we talk about, and it's our job to let you know these things exist. But it's your job to make sure that your clients, believe that it's there and they've got certification to prove it's there. So those certificates, those tech specs, they're all there for you to drag off. And everything we've talked about today in terms of dimensional stability at washing at 71 degrees, that's there. All of those things are really, really important.
With the addition of thumbnail images, room scenes, videos that take you through the entire range, back catalogue of different webinars featuring us too. So.
No, don't watch those.
So there's lots and lots of stuff on there, and I recommend. You can visit www.edmundbell.com. You can log in to fabric-hub.com, or of course you can get in touch with us via the normal different ways and means. We're very glad that you showed up to speak with us today.
Absolutely, and we were encouraging phone calls. Actually, it's great to talk to people rather than talking at screens.
Yeah, I've been actually doing quite a lot more phone calls. Zoom calls, done a lot of Zoom, but phone call is nice, isn't it?
Nice to talk to real voices.
Any questions, Adam?
There is this one from Ida. So now that we have COVID-19, most of the people keep on spraying alcohol on most of the surfaces that they touch. Is it fine to spray alcohol directly onto the fabrics?
Oh, good question. Actually, it's funny because I had something from a core a few months ago where they had put across, they put out some communication, and it was about, I I don't know that it was alcohol, but it was certainly an antimicrobial
spray.
mist that they would apply all over the room, and they were basically asking whether this would be safe.
This would be something that we would have to do some more testing around, and I don't think, to my knowledge, there's anybody that's done this just yet, because you would have to be specific to the brand, specific to the ingredients, and I think if you've got fabrics with stains and finishes on, or you've got fabrics that can be washed at 71 degrees, if you've got guests or people using, I think, using alcohol gels as well as sandpaper.
It's a little bit overkill in truth.
It's a bit over, it's a bit overkill on your drapery fabrics maybe, but it's definitely something.
My guess would be, and as Stephen said, we would need to do further due diligence on that. Particularly, I would suggest that the uncoated articles, things like the dim outs, the inherently flame retardant articles, would suffer no damage due to that. But your best bet is just to wash them as per instruction.
Because I think the testing would be a time test. I think initially in your short term, with your spraying them, you're not going to notice any damage or any difference to your fabrics if you're doing that. Absolutely not. What damage that would do to things like light fastness over time,
potentially,
those are the things that we would have to test.
There are definitely better solutions than spraying.
Do we have NRC ratings on our fabrics for acoustic sound absorbency?
NRC. Not a clue, and I would have to look that up for you. We will come back to you on that particular question. The testing that we have done, we tend to use the University of Salford, given that they're quite close to us. It is done in a fixed shape and size of room, with a fixed shape and size and fullness of curtain as well. And so you get really uniform size back. They give you a grade, so A, B, C, whatever. And also the coefficient figure as well. What we can do, we'll probably do when we revert to you on this issue, is we'll send you one of the test reports so you can see. I think
that's exactly it. That's the key to it. I think is have a look at the test report and the certificate. We believe it's the right thing that you need to look at in terms of sound absorption. It's quite a complex certificate actually. Quite a lot of information on the correct grading. So the grading for sound absorption will be A to G, I think, isn't it? A to F. And all of our demos generally sit in that A to D.
This might be another one we need to look into, but do we have LEED certificates for our fabrics? So that's on also the green building standards.
We don't yet, and that is something that we've raised before. Actually, we've talked about that. It's green certification, eco certification's a tricky one because there's that many different things, and it changes a lot. In the States, especially, LEED is well loved, I would say.
Right. Okay. So that's cool. So these are the things we should look into in terms of product development, and I think there's so many of them in the marketplace, and generally they cost a business like us money to kind of affiliate ourselves with. So it's almost like choosing the right one. So I suppose we'll look into those.
Last question. I've read about LRV within care. Can you explain what LRV is? So light reflectance values.
So in terms of LRV, so it's light reflection values basically. So you get a set of colours. So this comes from paint. So generally you would have an LRV rated in terms of a percentage or a score. And with certain areas of dementia and mental health, you've got to have a certain difference, 20 points difference between the colours. So if your colour is 10% on the LRV, you probably want to put a 30 to contrast with it, whether that's carpet to wall, whether that's, you've got your chair, you might have your seat in one colour, you might have your arms in the other, so that
it's to do with usability in the setting,
sort of
isn't
the
it?
3D visual of a room.
It's actually kind of fascinating.
It's something that actually we don't do enough of, and again, these things are so important to people, especially in mental health world, and not
the way that they're
health.
perceiving a room is entirely
different. It's absolutely right, and even to a point where the colours that you paint the corners of hallways makes such a difference in how they can see what they can see as they work down there. And I think when we talk about those guests in those scenarios, the same applies to the hospitality industry. As you mentioned earlier on, I think the older generation seems to be the people with the most disposable income these days. And so they're the ones probably frequenting hotels more often. And the same applies there, the same sort of setting and acoustics, LRVs, that sort of stuff is going to become more and more important.
It's going to be something we hear more and more about. I mean, we never used to hear about acoustic absorbency. It's only in the last 3 years or so that's a fever pitch of acoustic absorbency.
It's a common mistake. You all assume, you think when somebody says sound absorption or acoustic, you think, it's something they put up to stop sound from coming in. And actually, that's not what it's about. It's about
within the room.
Sound within the room itself.
That's it.
Super. Well, thank you very much. If you do have any further questions, please do get in touch and we will not hesitate to answer. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.